Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izzo, and we are live here from Lindencraft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show, we've done a lot of shows here where we talked about what's going on in the market and the status of the market, and the markets, housing markets are constantly changing. And we're in an odd market. I don't know if it's odd. It's just a reoccurring market that we've had in the past that has come back up again. But it's been very different than the market that we're accustomed to seeing. And and so we've got a lot of people where we've got a little bit more inventory than we've had before in the past. Some would say a lot more inventory than we've had in the past. Matter of fact, we're approaching, I think, numbers that we haven't seen in quite some time. And this has created for us a situation where if you're a seller of a home, you may be a little bit frustrated. Your house is maybe staying on the market a little bit longer than you had wanted it or anticipated it to be. Maybe the pricing, the offers that you're getting are not what you expect them to be. And so we want to address these things and talk about why some of these things are happening, and also what we, how we need to change our thinking, because we're going to, as markets fluctuate and change, we also need to change how we think in terms of these markets, whether we're a buyer or a seller. And so I needed somebody who has dug into the research and done that. And there was anybody better that I could think of than Steve Kruger, who is a home selling expert with Lindencraft Team Realtors. He also has his economics degree.
That's correct.
From the University of Tennessee.
Go Balls.
And he also has put together a whole bunch of research of what's going on in the markets right now, and also has some approaches maybe that can help us think about how we need to start thinking and how we adjust our thinking. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Steve Kruger. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You've got quite a few homes that you've listed so far this year, and you've got quite a few, and some of them are staying on the market a little bit longer than
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's than typical, right? So let's just talk about what we're seeing in the market right now before we get into some of the statistics. What are you seeing and your colleagues seeing in terms of listing homes and having homes on the market?
So they're definitely taking longer to sell.
Mm-hmm.
We are no longer in a market where you don't see a lot of multiple offers. Mm-hmm. One thing to keep in mind, and I'd heard this, read a bit about this, and then when I dove deeper into the numbers, I saw it very clearly. This is all very regional at the moment. Mm-hmm. The South, where we are, has seen its supply blow up, as has the Midwest. But areas like the Northeast are still undersupplied. So some of the things we're dealing with here might not apply to other parts of the country.
Okay.
But certainly here in Raleigh, because we're in the South, but we're also in one of the fastest growing parts of the South, we have a lot of inventory that's been growing and building faster than other parts of the country. And that's true of the Midwest as well. And that has a lot to do with new construction and like availability of land to actually build on, right? So at least here, so if you're in Connecticut and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, everybody sells their house with 5 offers the first weekend. That doesn't happen throughout the South. Certainly not here in the, in the Triangle. There's exceptions. So yes, I put a house under contract helping a buyer just recently where to make sure there weren't multiple offers, we actually went above list price to get the property, but it was a great property. Great properties will still stand out. So if your house is just everything about it's perfect and it's priced right, it's going to move quickly. We're back to just normal market conditions. I don't want to say normal. They're slightly abnormal at the moment, but closer to a normal market where it's just the best house. If you think about a price range, and let's just say you're shopping for a house that's $450,000, and you're looking at everything priced from about $4 to $450 or $425 to $475, whatever it may be. you're going to be attracted to the best house at the moment in that price range, right? Like if there's 20 houses, if one just really stands out to you because it's a great location and all the features look great, well, everybody else at the moment looking at those 20 houses feels the same way about that one house
Right.
that you do,
Right.
right? It's got all the updates, everything about it's just great. That house is going to see a lot of activity,
Right.
sell quickly, have multiple offers. So don't think that like every house just sits, but on average, they are taking longer to sell.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing more price adjustments as we start to familiarize ourselves with the market conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you my experience all year. It's tough. Pricing a house is not as simple as everybody thinks, first
Right.
of all,
Right.
because yes, I can look at the other sales in the area, and especially if you're in a neighborhood where the same builder or same caliber of builders built 200 houses and 5 of them sold in the last 6 months, that's a little easier. But there's just lots of differences between what gets built,
Right.
and then you're looking at trying to base that price on certain features, updates, all these things. So you've got a situation where you're looking in the past at numbers,
Mm.
but not recognizing yet that the numbers are actually going down.
Right.
So I've based your whole, we're looking at a price saying, oh, your house is worth probably 425 to 450, not realizing that the market is starting to shift. This was earlier in the year,
Right.
but the market's starting to shift, and your value might not even be what the past sales are telling us. And what I've found to be true is where that is the most dominant is houses that need improvements. And I don't mean necessarily like a total fixer upper that's rough,
Right.
Though those are affected too. But just a house that has dated features, but overall it's a great house.
Right.
Those are harder to sell right now, and they're selling for less money than you think they would because the buyers just have so many choices right now, and they're being extremely picky about what they will buy, and what they're willing to pay.
So in this market that we're seeing right now, my question is, what I mean, I guess as I'm thinking about what you just said, let's say you 90 days ago, you put a house on the market,
Mhm.
right? You had no idea in the next 90 days what the market's going to do. We're kind of guessing the market anyway, right?
Absolutely.
And so then, and I know we want to go in optimistically,
Mhm.
right? We want to go in, right? We were going, okay, based on, we're trying to go in as optimistically as we can in the next 90 days. But the market can shift in 30 days
Right.
or 60 days. And there's no signs that we have that can help us anticipate what's going to happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days in terms of our market, because typically in the Raleigh market, the Research Triangle Park market,
Right.
we've been pretty steady and strong, and we've had great appreciation. Things have kind of tilted a little bit that
Right.
were unexpected,
For sure.
that we couldn't. What are some of the data that you have pointed to where the market is right now,
Right.
and what's happened over the course of, say, the last 90 to 120 days?
Yeah. So that's a great point about how quickly we see a change in numbers. We've felt it and kind of known it was coming for a while, but so for Wake County, which is where we are, those that aren't familiar with Wake County, that's where Raleigh is, and the data came out at the end of September that year over year, our median price had dropped $20,000. That's almost 5% year over year from September of 2025, from 2024 to 2025. So we're all basing prices on sales in the past.
Right.
And you may go back. I've been going back really a year when I do a price analysis, just because I knew we were in a flat market.
Mhm.
But if you base that on sales from the past year, and all of a sudden it's becoming apparent that prices are maybe 3 to 5% lower,
Right.
then you're already starting off too high, right?
Right.
And so that's a big part of what we're dealing with. So, like nationally, active listings year over year from September of 20, excuse me, 2024 to 2025, active listings nationwide were up 17%.
Okay.
And again, like I said, that's a regional thing. There's also data that talks about like the south and the west. We now have, for the first time, well, I say now, at some point this year this happened. The inventory levels in our area and throughout the south and the west, from the data I looked at from Realtor.com, that we now have more inventory than pre-pandemic level.
Mm.
So for the first time since the market went crazy and we had such low inventory driving everything,
Right.
we now have even more inventory than we did before the pandemic hit in 2020.
Right.
So that's a major shift. And I was even on this show talking to you
Yeah.
probably 2 or 3 years ago about how we weren't going to see prices drop for a long time because of an inventory shortage. And that was true. And that's even now it's held stronger than I anticipated, because I really would expect prices to have been dropping. And I've got some other data about that and thoughts on that. But so we've had this inventory growth. You can look at the typical home now spends 62 days on market. That's what I saw again on the Realtor.com report from the September numbers. I know, like here in the Triangle, when I look at it, average days on market's like 30. But when they say the typical home takes 62 days, they're probably factoring in stuff that doesn't. The numbers can get very interesting because we can talk days on market, and that being everything that's sold. But if you really took into account the houses that just don't sell, that sit on the market for 6 months and then come off, if that all gets built into the numbers, that's where that average days on market goes up. I'm guessing that's where that 62 days on market number comes from, because there's also numbers from the Realtor.com report that are close to like 30 days on market for the average sale.
Right.
So, but that's an interesting number all in itself too, the 62 days, because we usually don't account for how many houses just give up. And that has a lot to do with our pricing, because those are sellers that were not willing to adjust their price to get sold at the end of the day. Now, could it have been a poorly marketed house? Sure, that happens. But, the majority of the houses nowadays, people are going to have pretty good photos in there. People look online, they're interested in the house. So a house that just sits and never sells, at the end of the day, it was the price. And that's part of what's being reflected in pricing right now too, is just sellers not willing to take less. And so the ones that do sell, they're still hovering around numbers from a year ago, when really they should not be. Because if you think about any product, right? Like, so one of the statistics I have is that here in Wake County, actually for Wake County, I've seen even higher numbers than this, but the Realtor.com report I'm talking about, growth year to year for the Raleigh-Cary market was 34%. We have 34% more inventory, but at the same time, it reports, and this is a nationwide thing, that demand is flat. So you basically have the same number of buyers that you had a year ago, but 34% more sellers. I don't care what your product is.
Right.
It can be gas. It can be bananas. It can be automobiles.
Right.
They all do the same thing. There's a simple economic principle. As supply increases and demand stays flat, price drops. You have to find an equilibrium.
Right.
And I could sit here and draw out a graph for everybody if they wanted to see. And if you took Econ 101, you probably got very tired of those graphs. And if you got a whole degree in it, you got tired of those graphs as well. But we have not, it doesn't feel like we quite have hit equilibrium. Now, there's also some things skewing that data, I think, because new construction is factored into a lot of the numbers we see. And new construction is not dropping their prices while really dropping their prices. And I know you've heard me talk about this before. What new construction is doing is, rather than drop their prices, which upsets all their other customers, right? So if you bought a house in a new community a year ago and you paid $450,000 for a house, if that builder all of a sudden sells that same house this year for $430,000, now everybody that bought a house a year ago is mad at the builder. What are you doing to my property value, right? They want to blame the builder instead of just the fact that that's the market. Like you bought a product that is in a market just like everything else, and it goes up and down based on supply and demand. But the builders are aware of that. They also don't want to put a comparable sale out there to reduce the price if things come around. So they're offering bigger incentives. A year ago, you might have just been offered like $5,000 in closing costs. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, we'll give you $5,000 in closing costs, plus we'll pay $15,000 towards a rate buy down. And we'll throw in a washer, dryer, and refrigerator. So if you actually accounted for all that, that $450,000 house really just sold for $430,000.
Right.
Excuse me. They just gave 20 grand more in incentives than they did just a year ago. And so that price came down, but it's not being reflected in the numbers because the numbers just say this house sold for 450,000. So I think that's also skewing data, and that's affecting resales. What a lot of people that are resellers are dealing with is if you're in a market with a lot of new construction. And that's why the South, when they talk about the South and the Midwest in particular, just a lot, we've had a lot of building activity. We continue to have a lot of building activity. And the builders were going nuts, building everywhere they can possibly build. And then all of a sudden the market cools off. So they start getting oversaturated with inventory. They've already, obtained lots and started building on them and everything else. They've got to move that inventory. They got to get it off their books and make some profit and keep their business going, right? So that's why they're throwing out these incentives like a lower interest rate, which is very attractive. So if you're a reseller and you're still trying to get this price where like you're going off of what something sold for a year ago and the builder doing a similar type of home somewhere within, let's say, 15 minutes of your house is at the price they were a year ago, but offering somebody can get in at an interest rate half a point lower, whatever it may be, then that's making that new construction a lot more attractive. The only way you can fight that as a reseller is drop your price. But the resellers are being hesitant to when I say hesitant, we're seeing the largest amount of price drops we've seen in a long time. That's another one of the data points is 20% of homes in September, this is nationwide, 20% of the homes in September had a price drop. So sellers are dropping their prices. They're not dropping them though to the extent that they need to really, if you think about it, when your days on market keeps getting longer and you've got more houses coming off the market. There's even data showing how 15% of homes in September were terminated. We're dealing with that again, where like the buyers just have so many options. They're like, if you're not going to fix these things or deal with these things, or I've discovered something I'm just not that happy with, I'm just walking away. Where when you have less inventory, they don't do that. They're like, I'll put up with this. Right now they're saying, I don't need you. I don't need your house. I'm just going to go find another one because I am looking online right now. There's 25 more houses that fit what I'm looking for. So it's all of that is just affecting how long it takes to sell and everything else. And I do think, well, it's a surprising market at the same time right now because interest rates, I just looked at it this morning before we did this. Nationwide, the average mortgage is 6.17%. It's the lowest it's been in a really long time. I mean, we're at the lowest we've been in over a year, and you would think that would have stimulated more demand than it is. Now, there's some signs that maybe it's starting to. Part of that might be the time of year too. If that had happened in April instead of September, you might have seen something different as well. But and that's why there's still a lot of optimistic projections for 2026. We'll see.
Right.
But yeah, the interest rates certainly have a big part of it too.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here, just to reiterate what you said. There is so much downward pressure on resale homes right now.
Right.
And I want folks to kind of just think with me. Let's remove our irrational emotional brain for a second. Let's lock into our rational logical part of our brain for a second. If you think about it, and let's say you're in a price where you're competing against new home, right? And that new home is offering $30,000 to $50,000 of incentives, right? And you're starting at the same price. It's pressure on you to do something different, right? And since the data has indicated that, buyer demand has remained flat, meaning we haven't seen an increase, and yet we've seen a 34% increase on inventory. Well, it doesn't take long for all of us to recognize, right? If we have an excess stock of something, what has to happen? Well, you have to adjust to the pricing, and the pricing has to come down. And so, when we start putting all these factors together, that downward pressure that we start to see in here, it makes pricing homes difficult. And the problem is, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 30, 60, or 90 days. And so, and we all want to get the most we can. I mean, listen, I'm empathizing with sellers because, listen, I understand you want to get the most you can for your home because you're looking at getting into your next home, right? And we're all sympathetic towards that, and we're also empathetic towards it because it can be very frustrating for you to have to go, well, 90 days ago, the home was worth this. Well, but you had all this downward pressure, and then the prices kept coming down. And as they kept increasing incentives, because there were always incentives from home builders, but they kept increasing them because then they had allowances that don't get factored into the total price, right? And so you could upgrade your carpet, you could upgrade the paint, you could get appliances upgrades, all sorts of things that you could get for your house. So understand there's just a lot of downward pressure on resellers in our market, and I know that doesn't help you right now if you're trying to sell your home here in the Triangle. I know that doesn't help you right now, but it is a reality that we have to deal with. And I think you said something earlier too, that, this is where the condition of the home is going to make a bigger difference.
Absolutely.
Right now. So, here's the thing that I think we're both saying is, okay, if you're putting your home on the market, is it in its absolute best condition? Because that's going to give you the best opportunity. No guarantees. Nobody's going to guarantee it. If anybody comes to you and guarantees it's going to sell in this market, they can't do that. But it does put you in the best position to sell, right? I think that's what you're also indicating here too. So what other marketing statistics or what other stats have you come across in terms of how much are we seeing? Are we seeing a decrease in resale properties overall in the Triangle area?
When you say decrease in price or decrease in the total number of sales?
Well, let's deal with the price. Are we seeing? We're seeing from 24 to 25 that the prices come down across price ranges, or
we're seeing? Yes, if you look at the data, I've been saying for most of the year that we've just been in a flat market. Mm-hmm. and we may get data in October that all of a sudden the median price in Wake County is back to even, because this happened actually July and August. So July showed a big dip, and like similar to this one, right? Like 5%, but then all of a sudden August showed an increase, like back to just flat. And then all of a sudden, September, we're seeing again this 5% dip. We maybe see October flat because we get too caught up sometimes in monthly numbers. And like anything, like you get a better reading on a market the longer time frame, right? So like 3 months, 6 months is going to be a lot more accurate. So we may still be in a primarily flat market,
right?
But based on the data for September, the prices are down. What I've noticed is they certainly seem down, and they're not down drastically. So anybody that thinks we're dealing with like what we dealt with in the Great Recession,
Yeah.
The housing crisis, that's not what we're dealing with, and shouldn't end up dealing with. We don't
Right.
have the same situation. That was the market got flooded with foreclosures and everything
Right.
else, and just brought prices down. And people were having a hard time getting a mortgage and all those things. We have really the most qualified group of buyers nationwide in the history of this country from the data that's out there, because they did tighten up on who gets the types of loans they get. When I first moved here 20 years ago, I was able to get what we called a no document loan because I had not done real estate before. I was moving here and putting down a pretty good sized down payment and had a very good credit score, but I didn't have excuse me, 2 years of experience in the industry I was working in to get a normal loan. And so the no document loan meant basically I didn't have to prove anything other than I had
Mm.
a good down payment and a good credit score. Those loans don't exist anymore, so we don't have sort of those issues. But we are seeing, it seems like a bit of a dip in prices. That 5% that we saw in the dip for the median sounds about right, and it's there's a disparity because, like I said, the better the house, they're still hanging on and doing at least what they did a year ago.
Right.
Where it's the ones that the more work they need. We just sold here on our team. A member sold a house that's absolutely like a fixer upper investor type of property. I showed it to someone. I was like, this would make a great flip. It it's sold for less than I would have originally expected, which shows me like the income potential in it is fantastic because you just have those investors that are out there willing to buy a property like that. They've got more to choose from, so they're all coming in lower. The people that look at it as I would just fix this up to live in it, they also feel like it's like there's sharks and there's blood in the water, right?
Mhm.
So like nobody's willing to pay as much for that type of property as they should. Like when I would analyze a house like that in the
Right.
past, I'd say here's the ARV, which is
Right.
your after renovation value. And I'd say, well, if it's going to be worth 525,000 after you spend this, then to me this property is worth this. And to me that particular house I'm talking about might have been 375, and yet it sold for 350. That's more of what I'm seeing now. It's like, and it doesn't even have to be a huge fixer upper. It can just be something that is dated but in really good shape. So, I've got it's very, very frustrating right now. Anybody out there that's frustrated as a seller, your listing agent is frustrated. We're all frustrated. I will get feedback on a house that's like, my clients have done all kinds of updates. They didn't go in and spend $100,000 updating the entire house to make it look like new construction,
Mhm.
but there's fresh paint, new flooring, new appliances, maybe some granite tops, and I'll get feedback. And where it's priced, I'm like, this should absolutely move as soon as we go. This was going back on the market, right? Because of feedback on needing updates. And I'm like, at this price with these updates, we're going to be sold instantly. And hardly any action at all. And the feedback's like, well, the kitchen cabinets are dated. And I'm like, yes, it's priced because the kitchen cabinet. If
Right.
those kitchen cabinets were replaced with new cabinets, we'd be $25,000 higher. But that's how that's what we all have to deal with right
Right.
now is
Right.
the buyers are just very, very picky because they have other options.
Right.
And so now granted, they wouldn't the house I'm talking about is priced at the moment at 425. To get what they really want, they might have to spend 450, where they could buy this one for 425, spend 15 grand putting the cabinets in that they want,
Right.
and save $10,000. But I get it. There's some hassle in that. Still, it's $10,000. But that was a more likely outcome when the inventory was lower.
Mhm.
So that's what we're all having to deal with. That's what we're all having to adjust to and trying to figure out. And at the end of the day, it all relates to price.
Right.
Because if
Right.
they're saying these
Right.
things, there's still a number at which
Right.
they're no longer saying them. They're like, I recognize this is enough value that I will go replace all the cabinets and I will replace
Right.
the whatever it is that they don't like about the house.
Right.
So those are the houses that I'm noticing. One of the data points in here too, which was interesting, is houses from like 350 to 500 are the ones that are having the most difficulty selling.
Mm.
As you get higher in price, they're not maybe affected quite as much by interest rates. The luxury properties in particular are the least likely to get price adjustments because the sellers are just like sitting tight and like, I'm going to get my
Right.
number. And when you think about buyers, if you're the buyer of a $2 million home, then the interest rate being higher than it was, 2 or 3
Right.
years ago, you still probably can afford to just buy that house. Yes, your mortgage payment
Right.
might be a couple $1,000s a month higher, but you make so much money, have so much
Right.
money, in investments and in the bank and everything else, that it's not affecting your lifestyle the way a first-time home buyer or even a young couple buying their second home or whatever
Right.
is. A change in their monthly payment is a much bigger deal. And that makes perfect sense why that 350 to
Right.
500 market, which are those first time home buyers, maybe second home buyers,
Right.
they're just all more affected by the interest rates. So there's fewer of them at the moment buying, or they're being much pickier about what they're doing because they have plenty of options.
Well, and I think this is where, if you're a seller in this market, you're, reselling in this market, you have to caution your own emotions, I think, because buyers are, and I hate to say it, but it's probably a pretty good analogy, that smelling blood in the water. So they feel that they can make a lower offer than they typically would have in years past, because they were in multiple offer situations. Some of these buyers may in fact have lost buyer, and that right. I mean, because there was a moment there, right? We had 20 plus people bidding on the same house, so that meant 19 plus people were losing,
right?
And so some of those people may have just said, "I'm just going to sit on the sidelines. I'm not going to deal with it." Some of them did eventually get into a house, but I think the thing that they're going is, okay, well, now that we've got all this inventory, there's downward pressure on pricing. I can look for every detail in a house and go, well, I'm not going to pay for that, so I'm going to offer.
Right.
And we psychologically, when we think about making an offer on something, we've all done this. Come on, let's all admit this. Even if you've been a seller, you've gone into a place and you saw a deal, you saw the piece of furniture that had a scratch on the corner, and it wasn't something that anybody was really going to see. And what did you do? You went into the store and you said, you know what, this has got a ding right over here in this back corner. And we all know that nobody's going to really see it, or it's going to take a marker to get rid of the scratch or whatever it is to cover it up. And what did you do? Right? Well, you didn't ask for $5 off, right? The price. You asked them what they were willing to do, and they generally gave you a pretty good deal. This is how buyers are reacting now in this market. Is they're taking a look at every little ding and nick in your house, and then what they're saying is, well, this is what I think that's worth. And so you're probably getting offers at this time, and you've probably seen it where people are coming in with offers. We've heard of it, that people come in with offers that are low, extremely low at times.
Right.
And some sellers, I hope you're not one of them, some sellers have been so offended, they just said, fine, I'm just not going to deal with it.
Right.
And they take their house off the market. That's part of this game too, isn't it? Because this is a very much a reality. What I think you're alluding to is that, well, buyers are looking for deals.
So one of the biggest things that's going on and isn't talked about enough probably is homes are a much more emotional purchase and sale
Right.
than other products, right? If I'm selling my car, and I might love my car and everything else, but unless it's like this, Corvette from the 60s that
Right.
I've restored lovingly, it's not quite as big a deal. So, we're negotiating on the price, whatever. But on your house, it's this personal, emotional thing.
Right.
The seller always feels like, like my house is the best and because of
Right.
this and that. And I've sold 500 listings in my career. I've heard it all. I know how sellers
Right.
think. I understand that, like, yes, this extra landscaping you did is stunning,
Yes.
but you spent $75,000 on it, and you might have added $10,000 value to your
Right.
house.
Right.
Because as nice as it is, that's just not the kind of thing that adds tremendous value to a house. And it goes beyond landscaping, but there's
Yeah.
just lots of things and I get it. You spent that money, you loved it. You got this wonderful garden or the restoration you did to your bathroom or whatever.
You added this extraordinarily expensive tile, right? That you had imported in,
Right.
right? That what the value is, but the buyer comes in and says it's tile.
That's a great one.
And
You're exactly right.
and even though you could say no, you don't understand, it was hand cut from Italy. Okay, they had to hand cut each one of these tiles so that they would fit specifically for this room. The buyer comes in and says it's tile.
Right.
So while you had a lot of value in it and you saw and appreciated the craftsmanship and the the artwork of it and the significance of it for you, the buyer comes in and just says it's tile.
Right.
And so,
and that's an emotional thing for that seller.
Right.
Right. It's not just that they spent the money. It's like this, like, I love this. Like,
yes.
It's why I chose this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, I remember a house we had, Kelly came in, Linda's daughter came in, who's an amazing artist, painter. And I wanted an Italian kitchen. So she Italian plastered with color and gave it this rough look and matched the color to the stone and did the whole thing. And it was amazing. And the amount of money that went into doing that work was significant, right? Yeah. People came in and go, well, this is really nice.
Right. But it's not worth it.
But it's not worth that. Right. Yeah. So there, the value, what you place on value as a seller is not, and this is where we have to, again, get our logical brain working, is not necessarily what the buyer's going to see, because the buyer's going to go, you could have went to Home Depot.
Right.
And put in the same tile. I'd been just as happy. Yeah. Right. And so I think there's that emotional piece that gets connected, because, if you're a seller, you're seeing this piece of property as, my gosh, I've invested in it. I've lived in it. I have had family in it. I have grown in it. It's got all sorts of memories attached to it. And every little thing that I've done to this house has been significant in some way. But let's try to put yourself in the buyer's shoes for a second. The buyer is saying, well, I don't know any of that history, A. And that's your history.
Right.
Because I want to create my own history in this house. And so while I can see that it's important to you, from the buyer side, he's not seeing the same value. Yep. That's hard. I get it. As a seller, that's hard. So what are we doing? What can we do? We're trying to help sellers get through the emotional part of it. What can we do right now to help sellers, in this market? What are some things that we can maybe get them get a mindset shift, or things that they can be doing?
So we're definitely back to the type of market where it becomes more important, like updates you might make to a house, staging you might do to a house, all those things that became so popular over the last 30 years, right? Because you still get it all the time. It's like, well, I'm going to go in and replace the carpet and paint, and then whoever buys it, they're just going to come in and rip it up and paint it another color. That's not true. I know everybody thinks that. And yes, it might happen. But you go buy a house that has brand new carpet and fresh paint, and you like those choices enough to buy the house, you're probably not spending another 25 grand to
Right.
do that again, right?
Right.
You would have bought the house that doesn't have those things, but at a
Right.
much steeper discount than the 25 grand it would
Right.
cost to do it. And choose your colors, which is why we always talk about neutral, because neutral is not offensive.
Right.
So like they're going to be just fine with it. Those colors that are chosen are based on what appeals to the vast majority of the
Right.
population.
Right.
So you're improving the house. Like I said, it is an emotional purchase and sale. So when the buyer walks in and has a positive emotional response, so like, oh, look at these
It's new.
lovely new floors and
Yeah,
this
it's
new
new.
right.
Yeah.
You can take a house that's 50 years old and make it feel new, even if you don't update a lot of things. If you just replace
Right.
or update, like if it's hardwood floors, refinish them if needed, maybe in a darker stain.
Right.
If it's carpet that needs replacing, replace it. Put in LVP, maybe whatever. Fresh paint. Those two things refresh the whole house. You might have polished brass doorknobs and light fixtures and everything else, and yes, those feel dated. And they're going to complain about those things too, but you've still refreshed the whole look of the house just with your walls and your floors. Those are the first two things I tell everybody make the biggest difference. It's also where you get the biggest profit. But you are now competing much harder than you've had to compete as a homeowner selling your house, much harder than you've had to compete for 5 or 6 years, and probably more than that. Because like I said, here in the triangle, or it said in the South, but I'm pretty certain that it applies to the triangle, the inventory is now above, one statistic was inventory levels are now 25% above pre-pandemic levels in the South. So you're competing more. How do you win in a competition? You have to be better, right? And if you're losing that competition, how do you become better? You drop your price, because now you're better than everything else you're competing with.
Right.
Once your price gets to a certain number. And that could be, you may be like, I'm not spending the money improving this house, or I don't have the money to improve this house. And that's fine. The house will sell at the right number because the same is occurring. Just like the house I mentioned in this firm that just sold for $350,000, I believe. I don't know for certain because I'm not the listing agent, but I'm pretty sure that's probably what they got. That house all of a sudden got to 350 and became the best house.
Right.
It was beating all its competition, because anything else for 350,000 and this house needed a ton of work, but anything for 350 was a whole lot smaller, still probably needed work, or in a bad location, or not as good a location, and all these various things. So it became the winner. It became the best value in its price category.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. You're competing. So you have to think about, what can I do to compete well with everyone else? And sometimes that has to do with, unfortunately, after you start getting feedback while you're on the market, and then that tells you either make some improvements, which I've had several sellers do, or pull it off, not pull it off the market, but bring your price down so that you're now attractive enough. So
yeah, and I think there used to be, and this is years ago when I was first in real estate, and I'm talking about late 90s ish. We used to say, when the market was like this, it's a beauty contest, right? Is
Absolutely.
what we would say, and I know that doesn't just, but it often is a beauty contest, because you know what, we buy with our eyes. I'm sorry. I mean, you could go to a restaurant and you can have one dish that looks absolutely fabulous, right? And you can have another dish that may taste absolutely fabulous, but looks absolutely hideous. And you're always going to choose the dish that looks better, which is why they clean the outside of the dish so that there's no spills. And right before you get the dish, everything is perfectly set in that plate. So they plate it in a particular way. Because we eat with our eyes, we buy with our eyes, we do everything with our eyes. So I know that you don't want to hear that it's a beauty contest, but it really is a beauty contest. And it's not just the outward beauty. Okay, here's where I want you to be careful here, because what we're saying here is, yeah, power wash your house. That's great. Make sure the lawn and your landscape is looking good, right? Because that's a first impression. but what's the first impression when they walk in the door? Right? Because this is where you're going to win over the buyer. And you do, and Steve made this really, really clear. You have to understand you're in a competition, and the competition just got bigger. You're not competing against one or two homes. You're competing against a dozen, maybe 20, maybe 30,
Right.
maybe 40, maybe 50, right? That they're possibly looking at. Well, how are you going to stand out? If you're
exactly right.
30 or 40 homes, how are you going to do that? And that's a mind shift as a seller you have to think through. What are you going to do to stand out? And I think that's critically important in this market in particular, because and I know here's the other thing, and we didn't talk about this, but a lot of people are still comparing to themselves to the pandemic market.
That's part of the problem too, right? Because you're trying to sell your house and you're like, my neighbor
Back in
2 or 3 years
2022,
ago, and
right?
even if they sold their house 2 years ago and maybe
Right.
they didn't have multiple offers, but they still sold quickly
Yeah,
and pretty much for the number they wanted.
right.
And now all of a sudden they're like, what's going on here? And this feels right. And they're aware of what other houses
Right.
sold for. So they're like, why am I not even getting the number of
Right.
what that house sold for? And then that is where, especially in the case of that house,
Right.
the value is down from where it was at the time
Right.
the house sold. So, and you mentioned something about first impressions. Your first impression is really the photos before they even set foot in the house, right? So how do those photos look too,
Right.
as far as features of the house?
Yeah, and we try to be really careful. I know you guys, when you get photos back, you guys are looking at them really closely to go, you know what, this isn't the best angle. This doesn't show the room, exactly right, because how we see a room when we stand in it versus what we see in a two-dimensional picture is
Right.
often two different things, and we're trying to present that as best as
Yeah.
we can too. Lighting, making sure it's lit correctly, the whole thing. I know you don't think about, are necessarily thinking about this, but lighting is important. Just got a chime in here. It says a huge part of marketing is constant analysis of the ever-changing data and great communication of that data to your client. Yeah, I think that's a huge point, is that, regular communication, right? That this is something you need to, probably evaluate. It's a great evaluation. How's the communication? I mean, how often do you communicate with your sellers?
Weekly, basically.
Weekly? You do a weekly?
I mean, it all depends on the seller. Some it's
Right.
more than that because they're reaching out to me, but I have a weekly conversation about what's going on with the market.
Yeah.
Obviously, if other things are going on, it becomes more than weekly because you might have showings and there's a
Right.
question or feedback you want to go over or whatever. But a weekly conversation about what's happening with the market. I just had one yesterday with a guy, and I pulled the market report like, since your home went on the market, here's what's sold in the same location and price range, which the data showed us nothing had sold in that. He just went on the market a week ago, but nothing else had sold that was similar in that period of time. And also looked at like his active competition. He has a townhouse that in our market, townhouses are having a really tough time because there's the new construction. There's a lot of townhouses being built throughout the triangle. And the same thing where those builders are giving all these incentives. So you're trying to compete with that. So, but anyway, that's, I went over that with him and I'll do it again next week if we're not sold. So.
Yeah, I think I think that's it. I think because the market is continually altering itself, right, beyond our control, right? I think that regular communication becomes really important to you as a seller, as a resale seller, and that becomes really, really important. Is there any other data that you have that we didn't talk about that we should maybe just briefly mention before we close this show that you can think of?
I mean, no particular number. One thing I did find fascinating, which I already kind of was aware of, but as I took a deeper dive into things, is how much this is regional, because like the Northeast, it pointed out, is below pre-pandemic levels, where here in the South we're so much higher. And so that does affect it. We tend to talk in terms sometimes where with national numbers,
Right.
and if you live in the South and you hear them talking about national numbers, those numbers are actually better
Right.
than what they are here in the South, because we have one of the highest concentrations of inventory right now versus other regions. So.
Yeah, and you know, the news media is going to give a general projection. They aren't looking region by region by region, but I think it's really important for you, wherever you're living and wherever you're watching or listening to the show, know your region, what that's doing. Don't just look at national data and assume, okay, I must be the same part of the national data. No, the thing that Steve found that was so, as he said, fascinating, is that region by region, every market's different. And so make sure that you know what's going on in your specific market, because that's going to give you a better indicator of what's going to happen, even though we can't predict what's going to happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days. This has been really good. Thank you for doing this.
I would add to that last point.
Yeah.
Hire a professional that has a lot of experience and knows what the market's doing, because they know the regional numbers and what's going on.
Yeah, and they know how to be agile. You know what I mean? They because like you've been doing this a billion years, and
Feels like.
Right. Well, I'm sure in this market it feels like it's even longer sometimes. But I mean, you've been doing this a long time, so you've experienced a variety of different markets already in your long career, where this doesn't emotionally. Yeah, you could be a little frustrated, but it's like, okay, well, I've seen this before. This is where we have to pivot, and you know how to pivot in these markets. Where some folks who haven't been through these markets don't know exactly what to do. And that does give you an advantage, because you know how to pivot in this market.
For sure.
So that's incredibly important. Tell people and they get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you. And they should, by the way, you should reach out to him.
So I am Steve Kruger with Linda Craft Team here in Raleigh, and my phone number is 919-740-9795. You can also email me, steve@lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com.
Yeah, I usually go LINDACRAFT.com. Just put a Steve in front of that. Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week? You have a lot of choices. You chose us. I appreciate you staying with us and listening to us wherever you are listening. If you're listening to us by podcast, would you please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends about the show and tune into it. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up there at YouTube. It would be fantastic as well. Like us on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you may be watching us live. We appreciate you so much. As I say to you this, and it is this I say all over the world, and it is ciao, everybody.
Ciao.